Have a period of walking meditation now, as we did yesterday, and follow the same kind of instruction in terms of the format. Hopefully, people can find a good space, 15 or 20 paces along, either on the ground floor or up on the roof in different places, and during this period of walking meditation, I would recommend starting off just focusing on the rhythm of your feet, touching the ground as you walk. Then after your concentration, your attention is well established, then to consciously open up the field of awareness. And as I was talking about this morning, of this principle of seeing the world in the mind, just as you're walking, to see if, even as the body is walking, to see if you can appreciate that quality of stillness in the sense of awareness. So, just as I'm moving my hand side to side, the hand is moving, but that which knows the hand isn't moving. So just as there's a perception of the body walking, the body is walking, but that which is knowing, which is aware of the walking, is always present. So that to see if that's something that you can say appreciate or realize as the walking is going on, to see that there's the perception of walking happening in the mind, but the mind is not located. The mind is not fixed in any one position, but is always present and aware, knowing of the changes that are coming and going in the field of perception. So hopefully that makes sense. And so it's now just about 1:45 by this clock. Not sure which is the right time, but if we go and find a place to walk and then gather back, if you can ring the bell 25 past. And then there was a request for a bit more time to have questions and discussion, so that then after that walking period, then we'll have time for some Dhamma questions. So not to be encouraging you to be thinking about your question while you're walking, but just to say that that'll be what we have scheduled for the next part of the afternoon after this walking period. Oh, since there was a request to have more time for questions and discussion, then I assume there are a few in the room. So please feel most welcome to raise whatever you would like to ask about, and please use the microphone so everyone can hear clearly.
There was a question over the online.
Please. Yes.
Shweta Anandji asked, it was in continuation of the previous question by Deepji, that what is the value of solitude? What is the importance of seeking solitude in our daily life so that we can do meditation and we don't become self-critical?
Well, solitude and lack of self-criticism aren't necessarily equated. But solitude is, there are different kinds of solitude. The Pali word is viveka, for retreat or seclusion, solitude. So the first kind, kaya viveka, means physical solitude, so being alone. So that's the most obvious kind of solitude, but it's also the most superficial in a way. There was, in the Buddha's time, there was a monk just known as Thera, which means elder, and he really liked his kaya viveka. He walked alone, he lived alone, he would go on arms around alone, he would meditate alone, everything he did alone. It was really fixed on solitude. And so word of his way of doing things reached the Buddha, and the Buddha said, invite him to come and see me. And then so he said, yes, it's all very well being physically alone like this, but there are other kinds of solitude, other kinds of seclusion that are also important. So the second kind of viveka is called citta viveka, which is an internal seclusion or a detachment from the sense world. So in the midst of activity and people and things, there's an inner seclusion. So this is why Ajahn Sumedho called the monastery of Chithurst Citta Viveka. It's the name of the monastery, because he saw that he was also very fixated on kaya viveka. And when they were living in London, in a busy city like Delhi, a lot of noise, people, activity, and he kept thinking, I want to go back to my kuti in the forest. I want to go back to Thailand. I don't want all these people, all this activity, all this noise. And then he realized that his mind was fixed on this very superficial level of viveka, and that he started to also using the listening to the inner sound, the nada. He decided he would change his attitude and change his way of practicing. And so he realized that if you were interested in Theravada Buddhism and you wanted to learn how to meditate, there's only about 2 or 3 places in the whole of the UK you could go, one of which was the Vihara in London where he was living. There's very few sources of meditation guidance. And so he said, well, here in England, we've responded to this invitation. Of course, people are going to show up. So if I'm resenting them for showing up, then who's the fool? So he shifted his perspective, and rather than focusing on kaya viveka, physical seclusion, he decided to focus on citta viveka. And he used listening to the nada sound as a way of cultivating that inner seclusion. So when he was with people or on the London Underground, on the metro, around and about, then he would be using that inner listening as a way of being amongst people and being in the middle of things and in business meetings and such like for the trust, and yet maintain that quality of seclusion. So our physical seclusion, solitude, it can be a useful tool, but like anything, a tool can be handled in an unskillful way. So if we can find time alone, and we can find, say, situations where things are quiet, where still, where there's a lack of engagement, fine. But if your peace totally depends on physical seclusion, then you're making yourself very vulnerable. Then anything that comes along that people come to visit, your dearly beloved family members or friends, this person's interrupting my meditation, they're ruining my seclusion. And so then the mind is setting itself up for disturbance. So when Ajahn Sumedho changed his attitude towards focusing more on citta viveka, he still liked to be alone and still appreciated times of physical solitude, kaya viveka, but he wasn't so dependent on that for the quality of peacefulness and ease. And then when they were given the forest in the countryside, it just happened to be in a village called Chithurst, and so it was close to the word chitta, and so he chose the name Chitta Viveka for the monastery because of the importance of that insight that he had at that time. There's also a cottage on the lane which is called Chitta's Cottage, spelled Cittas, Chitta's Cottage, which I think, how did they get a Pali name? But apparently Chitta is the name of a ancient local goddess of that, the Rother Valley. So that was the Chitta of Chithurst Lane. So in terms of lack of self-criticism, I would say Chitta Viveka, and then the third level of Viveka is called Upadhi Viveka. And Upadhi is a difficult word to translate in English. Probably there's Sanskrit equivalents and probably Hindi equivalents. But Upadhi means the basis of existence or the substratum of identification or attachment of being. And so Upadhi Viveka means essentially seclusion from the defilements. So it's like the heart not drawn in by greed, hatred, and delusion. And so that the Upadhi Viveka is synonymous with profound insight and qualities of liberation. So that's more difficult more challenging to establish. But to shift the focus from Kaya Viveka as a refuge to Chitta Viveka, particularly for urban people, and I'm presuming most of you either live in Delhi or in other cities, developing that Chitta Viveka, that inner seclusion, so then you're in amongst people and things and activity, but yet there's a quality of ease and stillness in the midst of activity. That's a more helpful refuge. In terms of self-criticism, I'd say whether you're with people or apart from people, it's more to do with Upadhi Viveka. That's the defilement, seclusion from the defilements of aversion, criticism, and the subtle aspects of self-creation. So that is it's more challenging, but it's where I would say insight meditation and looking at how self-view and conceit gets formed and unplugging the habits of I-making and mind-making, that's what really helps to change those compulsions of self-criticism. It's like, who is it that's being criticized and who's doing the criticizing? If that's really looked at, and that the empty nature of the self view, the self-perceptions is recognized, then it's much less of a burden or a problem. If you listen to Luang Por Sumedho's Dhamma talks, he often says that he's his own worst critic. No one has been as nasty to him in the world as Ajahn Sumedho has. No one has ever been so nasty to me as I have. Frequently he mentions that he has a very self-critical mind, but he knows how not to make anything of it. Any other questions from the room? Could you switch the microphone on?
Dear Ajahn, I've been listening to you online. I stay overseas, so I couldn't really attend in person. So it's a great honor to attend your session in person. So I just came today from a meditation retreat and I just rushed here because I had some questions. Actually I had two unrelated questions. So the first one is, as we progress on the path of Dhamma and we start becoming more kinder and generous, sometimes it also, like, we become more kinder to our family members, even if the personality doesn't match, but they start becoming more possessive of you. They want you to be around them, but at the same time, you want to spend your time with like-minded people. And then they start asking about your whereabouts, where you're going, and all those like controlling stuff. So my question is, when we become more kind and generous, and how do we take care of to set a healthy boundary so that they don't become so possessive of us, and also give us our independence so that we can spend time with other people and balance out our time? So that's my first question.
Let's just do one at a time.
Okay. So
Let's do one at a time.
Okay.
Just do the first question first.
So
just do the first question first.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why my question is, how do you set that healthy boundary so that they don't become possessive? And because
I heard you. Yeah. So essentially, be mindful. Yeah. Often we get into a habit of pleasing others and feeling that we've got to say things that other people want to hear, we pick up their attitude and make it our responsibility. Like if someone says, I need to have you around, then we easily pick that up and say, oh, therefore it's my responsibility to be around. Instead, if we're really mindful, we recognize, well, no, that's what this person is saying. That's theirs. I need you to be around. That's their feeling. You don't have to do anything with that, I would say. That that's what's going on within them. I would say that there isn't any fixed responsibility or need for us to pick it up in a certain way. They might say, you have to help me. Say, well, that's your feeling. It might seem quite hard-hearted, but we don't have to do that in a callous way, but just clearly and consciously recognizing that is actually what they're expressing. That's what they're feeling. I don't have to do anything with that. I'm not pushing it away, but there's nothing that forces me to respond to them in the same terms that they are addressing me. I found this is an area I'm quite familiar with because I'm a compulsive person pleaser. And so for years and years and years, I would immediately say, oh yes, what can I do? Oh yes, of course. It's my job to help you. Or yes, I should do that for you. And then I found myself getting completely entangled and drawn in and with far too many responsibilities. And so I began to really apply the practice to that, and a lot of mindfulness of speech and mindfulness of interactions. And that when people would say, what are we going to do about this? Rather than me saying, well, we could do this, 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 or this, I learned to say, good question. Rather than suddenly picking it up and making it my thing to be doing. And that, and then when someone says, you've got to help me, I said, well, I appreciate that you feel that I've got to help you, but that's your feeling. That's the way you're relating to the. I mean, you put the words together according to what the relationship is and the appropriate way of speaking, but to recognize that's what they're putting out, and you don't have to pick it up. there's more to do with aversion than asking for help. There's a very interesting dialogue in the suttas where this character called Bharadvaja the Abusive, and it starts off with this Brahmin who stops the Buddha in the street and accuses him of being someone who's upsetting the whole social order. He's disgracing the Kshatriyas by going on alms round, and he shouldn't be going against the ways and customs, and is kind of angry with him and upset. So the Buddha gets into a dialogue with him, and this first Brahmin is then so impressed, he becomes the Buddha's disciple. So then I think it's his brother comes along and says, you seduced my brother, you dragged him off into the monastery and turned him into a monk, how dare you? He was even more angry and very upset with the Buddha for disturbing the social order and going out for alms as a warrior, noble prince and so on. And so then the Buddha then speaks to this Bharadvaja and said, Bharadvaja, so is it the case that you sometimes have friends or family come to visit you? He said, yes, of course I do. Like any ordinary householder, people come to visit. He said, so if friends or family come to visit, do you offer them some kind of refreshment, some food or drink when they come? Of course I do. That's the polite, ordinary thing to do. And then the Buddha said, so if when you offer them food and drink, they decline to accept it, they don't accept it, then to whom does it belong? Well, it belongs to me, of course. They haven't received it, so it's mine. And the Buddha said, you offer me your anger. I don't accept it, so it belongs to you, Brahmin. It belongs to you. And he was so impressed that he became a disciple of the Buddha and eventually became an arahant. And even when he was an arahant, he still was known as Bharadvaja the Abusive. That was his nickname. It's still in the suttas. That's his nickname for the last 2,500 years. So that kind of clarity where somebody offers you their excitement, their fear, their anxiety, their aversion, or their attachment, it's up to us whether we pick it up. Now, it takes a lot of mindfulness. And it's not a cold-heartedness. It's not a get away from me, leave me alone. But it's like, I love you, I care about you deeply, and no, I'm not picking that up. And that takes a lot of skill. But
sometimes a lot of irritation steps in when they try to be pushy.
Oh, yes. I don't live in an Indian family, but so I can't speak from direct experience. I grew up in the southeast England where we invented the stiff upper lip. And there's a sort of emotional remoteness that we have, but families can still be demanding and have lots of expectations. So within the dynamics of the family, the more clear you are within yourself, the more you can trust that. No, I love you, I care about you, and no, I'm not going to pick that up. And that you might want to know where I am at all times. That's your business. I'm on retreat. I'm switching my phone off. I'm not available for this time. I love you completely, and my phone is switched off. And if you're just confident within yourself, then that confidence and that self-assurance helps to will communicate itself. And even if people say, if you love me, you keep your phone on. So if that's your opinion, may you be happy with it. You have to pick that up. And as the abbot of a monastery, I not my biological family, but I have a big Dhamma family, so that I'm receiving a lot of projections from a lot of people. And you got to be there for me, Ajahn. I need you. Like, well, that's your perspective. And without pushing people away or fearing them or being aversive, just say, no, that's what you're bringing. So that's your projection. I don't criticize you for it, but I'm not buying into it. I don't have to respond in the same terms. And if you read the suttas, it's astonishing how regularly the Buddha did not respond to people in the same terms that they approached him or they questioned him. Or regularly he would rephrase a question or he would direct the conversation in a different way. It's quite rare, I would say the minority of times, that he actually responds to someone in exactly the same terms that they've approached him. There's always as a receiver, he kind of goes into the space of his wisdom, and then a response comes forth from that. And being around Ajahn was very similar, that you could never predict how he would respond to any situation. It was very much not drawn into somebody's mood or excitement or fear or aversion or whatever.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful to know. It's a quick skill I think one needs to cultivate.
So a lot of mindfulness is mindfulness of relationships is the superior practice. It's the kind of advanced course. Yes. Yeah. You could. Oh, you can wait for a microphone. Go ahead. You can go after. Yeah.
Yeah. Please tell me something more about the awareness.
Tell you something more about awareness.
Yeah.
The Pali word, you can pass to this lady here. The Pali word vijja, which means knowing. The opposite is avijja, ignorance. So ignorance doesn't mean not knowing the facts, but it means being unaware. Vijja means being aware. And so the quality of awareness is, I would say, a natural attribute of the citta. And when the citta is free of obscurations, then that awareness is what knows all of the aspects of the field of experience without confusion, without delusion. So when we talk about the Buddha as a refuge, then it's not just referring to Gautama Buddha who lived 2,500 years ago, but one of the frequent themes of the forest tradition teachings is that the Buddha, which is the refuge, is that quality of awareness. Buddha, buddhi, means that awake, aware quality of the heart. And that when there is that, when we genuinely are taking refuge in the Buddha, it's not just an idea or a set of words in our mind, it's that choice to be awake, to be aware. And that when that awareness is clarified and undistorted by greed, hatred, or delusion, by self-view and conceit and so forth, then there's a clear knowing of the flow of experience, and the heart is not confused or attached to that. So in that sutta I was quoting earlier, the dialogue between the Buddha and Vacchagotta, where he said that the Tathagata cannot be reckoned, is liberated from being reckoned in terms of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. That is, in a way, representing, or that's a way of talking about the awareness of your own heart, that awareness can't really be measured in terms of the five khandhas. It knows the five khandhas arising and passing, but it's not limited by the five khandhas. That's why liberation is possible. And so that I know in Abhidhamma that there's as far as I'm aware, it comes across that, I'm not an Abhidhamma expert, but it comes across that every kind of cognition is somehow part of the five khandhas. But if every kind of knowing, every kind of cognition was part of the five khandhas, then liberation would be impossible. There has to be an aspect of a knowing or of awareness that is completely free of the limitations of the five khandhas. Otherwise, liberation would not be possible for anybody. And that was when Ajahn Chah met his teacher, Ajahn Mun. That was one of the essential points that he put across. He said that the mind that knows and the mind objects are separate. This is why liberation is possible. It's because of the entanglement of the mind that knows and its identification with the objects, with the five khandhas. That's why we keep getting caught up and rebirth keeps happening. But it's because the quality of awareness is not intrinsically identified or conjoined with form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. That's why liberation is possible. So when the young Ajahn Chah heard that, the bells went off, and he thought, all right, that's it. Just follow that. And he had this great faith, this great confidence. So that was the key principle. And so because the word awareness or the idea of awareness is not awareness itself, and that the more that we practice meditation and the more we develop that quality of insight, then the more that awareness is freed from the habits of attachment of I and me and mine, or the body, the personality, and so forth. So it's a little bit more about awareness. Please, yes.
My question is around the relationship between anatta and karma. And so if I don't exist and it's not my karma and I'm not going to be reborn, so what is my motivation for practice?
Well, that's a mixing of the relative truth and ultimate truth. So that to the extent that, like when we have the 5 subjects of frequent recollection that I mentioned. So I'm of the nature to age. I've not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I'm of the nature to die. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing. I'm the owner of my karma, heir to my karma. There's a lot of I ams in there. So on the relative level, then there's this person. This is where action is being generated, and so where the action is generated, then that's where the cause is generated. That's where the effect is felt. So if you're speeding in your car, the policeman will stop you, and you'll get the ticket. That's karma and its result, and its vipaka, karma and its result. On the relative plane, if you say to the police officer who's just pulled you up for speeding, all dhammas are not self, officer, you'll say, here's a ticket and here's an extra fine as well, for being cheeky. So it's important not to mix those levels, and so that like you can say today is Sunday. Ultimately, it's not Sunday. There isn't really any Sunday. It's just a human agreement. This particular planet spinning around in this particular part of the galaxy, and it moves in this particular way, and the beings that live on this planet say Sunday. It's nothing absolutely real there. It's just an agreement. But it's convenient to call it Sunday. Then people know, oh, that's the day to come to Dhammarama and have this event. So ultimately, there isn't any Sunday. Ultimately, the sun doesn't rise and set. It only appears to because of the spinning of the earth. But we say sun rises at 6:20 in the morning. Sunset is such and such a time in the evening, and it's convenient and it's meaningful on a worldly level. But ultimately, it's not the fact. So that then you can say there isn't really any being that owns that acts or receives the result of action, but on the level of convention. If an action has been caused based on greed, hatred, and delusion, then there'll be as based on feelings of self, then the effect of that action will be felt in the same place as the cause. The effect and the cause happen in the same place. So I hope that's not too complicated. But it's often, people were asking the Buddha this year, if all dhammas are not self, who is it that's reborn? And he'd say, and then he gave this wonderful example. He said, well, if you consider your life, are you the same person now that you were when you were a 1-year-old baby? I said, well, no. Are you completely different? No. There's a relatedness, because if the baby injured itself and got a scar, from an injury, then that scar will still be there in someone who's 20, 30, 40 years old. But you're not the same person as the baby. But there's a relatedness, there's a connectedness. And that's also how the whole process of rebirth occurs. It's not like one single being being born and sort of like an Atman going from one body to another, like a distinct separate soul or self. But rather there's a cascade of related effects and events. And the one of the ways that the Buddha talked about the practice of the Eightfold Path is, he called it the karma that leads to the end of karma, the action that leads to the end of action. So that you are you're working with the mind, you're taking action, you're steering the mind in a particular way in order to live in a way that is completely attuned, so that then, so an arahant is to some degree is no longer creating any karma. It's not creating any action that's going to have any kind of, particularly any kind of negative result. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So it's just about 3 o'clock now. So time. We'll have a time for tea. There'll be another period of time for questions later on. Since you come rushing here from a retreat, you weren't here for the rest of the time. But we will have another time for questions later on. But we'll have a pause for some refreshment right now, and then gather back together at 3:30.